Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Preston McNair. Thanks for joining. I'm Vice President of Sales for Sangoma, and today I'll be talking about the FreePBX Endpoint Manager, an add-on to the world's most popular open source PBX platform that allows you to easily deploy VoIP handsets with your FreePBX deployment. I expect today's session should take about 25 to 30 minutes with some Q&A time at the end. So let's get started with a quick overview of Sangoma. When I do these presentations, I sometimes find that not everyone knows the history of Sangoma or how we're associated with FreePBX. Sangoma started back in 1984. We're over 34 years old, and we're a stable, growing company with a proven track record. We've got 15 or more offices around the world: Hong Kong, India, Germany, Spain, Italy, UK, Ireland, Ecuador, Colombia, Toronto, Montreal, Boston, New Jersey, Alabama, Atlanta, San Diego, probably one not too far from you. Sangoma Technologies is the world's largest provider of open source communication solutions and is the primary developer and sponsor of the Asterisk project, the world's most widely used open source communication software, and the FreePBX project, the world's most widely used open source PBX software. Sangoma leads the market in what we like to call the enterprise value-based communication segment, which includes small businesses to large enterprises who are looking for all the advantages of unified communications or advanced business phone systems at a fair price. Sangoma's UC solutions meet the needs of this segment with advanced features such as presence, chat, conferencing, mobility, fax, and more built into the base platforms. This enables businesses to truly communicate better with their customers through a high-quality solution with a low total cost of ownership. Sangoma's voice over IP offerings include on-premises and cloud-based phone systems, SIP trunking services, and telephony hardware. Sangoma's products and services are used in leading PBX, IVR, contact center, carrier networks, and data communications applications worldwide. So I mentioned that Sangoma's the world's largest provider of open source communication solutions. We spend millions per year bringing Asterisk and FreePBX to the marketplace. Asterisk, of course, being the telephony engine or framework that is the engine of FreePBX, and FreePBX being an all-in-one IPPBX that, well, is free to use. FreePBX is deployed in 220 countries and territories with over 20,000 new distro installs per month. This accounts for millions of active deployments globally all across the planet. FreePBX currently has 1.3 million lines of code and close to 250 contributors. One thing that most people don't understand about most open source projects is that much of that development is done by the project maintainers or sponsors. Sangoma spends countless man hours per year developing and continuing to expand on the included feature set of FreePBX. With that investment and being a for-profit publicly traded company whose employees like to eat, we have built out add-ons to the platform that allow you to expand on the base feature set of FreePBX, and hopefully provide enough of a return on investment for you, our customers, to have you contribute back and support the project by purchasing these add-ons. By far, our most popular FreePBX add-on to date is our Endpoint Manager, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the session. So FreePBX is open source and open standards, meaning you can connect virtually any SIP-based VoIP device to it and start making calls. That's often easier said than done. The reason we created Endpoint Manager as an add-on is because we found that even with SIP phones and the SIP protocol having a recognized standard, consistency among manufacturers is just not a thing. Every manufacturer has a different interface or file structure for configuring their specific phones to connect to your PBX. So even with the ability to utilize dozens of manufacturers' devices in FreePBX, prior to Endpoint Manager, you lost the consistency that using a legacy phone system or PBX platform would provide you. So a major benefit of the FreePBX Endpoint Manager is that we give you one GUI that is, or user interface that is standardized across all brands, providing system administrators the same basic management tool no matter which supported hardware they're deploying. In a nutshell, you can manage devices from multiple vendors using the same interface. It lessens the learning curve and provides a consistent experience across inconsistent technologies or device platforms. We currently support over 300 devices in our Endpoint Manager and 24 different brands. As the popularity of the Endpoint Manager application has grown, so has the need to control the chaos of supporting so many brands and devices. So going forward, we will add new devices only from brands that have partnered with us on our FreePBX certification program. The current brands that are certified are, of course, Sangoma S-Series phones and Digium D-Series phones, and we support select handsets from SNOM, HTech, and Grandstream. In total, as of today, we support 24 different manufacturers' devices at some level. Those brands in alphabetical order are Astra, Algo, Advanced Network Devices, Audio Code, Cisco, Cortelco, Cyberdata, Digium, Grandstream, HTech, Incom, Comptel, Mitel, Moset, OBI, Panasonic, Phoenix, Polycom, Sangoma, SNOM, Uniden, VTech, Zorcom, and Yealink. Our recommendation when deploying FreePBX is for you to select either Sangoma S-Series phones or Digium D-Series phones. These devices give you the tightest integration with the platform and require no additional cost for the EndPoint Manager add-on when deployed with the FreePBX distro. This is another way to support the ongoing development of FreePBX while at the same time providing yourself with a huge return on investment while deploying the system and a tight feature integration for your end users. One often overlooked feature is in our EndPoint Manager. You can also easily deploy and auto-provision Sangoma gateways for when you need to connect your PBX to the PSTN. So looking at our phones, Sangoma S-Series phones provide everything from entry-level desk phones to higher-end Wi-Fi and Bluetooth-enabled phones capable of supporting up to 7 expansion modules. And of course, we offer DEC-based handsets as well. And just recently, we've added the Digium D-Series phones as a free and included option for EndPoint Manager when deploying with the FreePBX distro. We'll even be adding the high-end touchscreen Digium phone, the D80, as a supported device really soon. So I'm going to quickly go through the key components of EndPoint Manager, then give you a quick walkthrough so you can understand how they relate. EndPoint Manager is designed to allow you to define global settings that all your devices will use, then build templates for those specific phone models, customize those templates for your end users with speed dials and BLF keys, and even define custom firmware and background images. When you install EndPoint Manager, the first step you should take to start using it is to define your global settings. These are things like your internal PBX IP addresses and external IP or fully qualified domain names that your phone registered to. For things like phone administrator passwords, EndPoint Manager preloads defaults from the phone system where it can. For example, the default admin passcode is 222222. You'll probably want to change that. It's a best practice to not have standard default passcodes. You can also enable your phones that support it to log in using our HotDesking application. I'll talk a little more about that later. Each option that's listed in the global settings does have an embedded help text, and you can also view a full user guide online in our FreePBX wiki. So once you set up your global settings and have those configured, the next step is to select what brands of phones you'll be using. To keep things clean, we don't display brands that you're not using. For this reason, when you start setting up EndPoint Manager, you will notice that there are no brands other than Sangoma and Digium listed. We include those by default since those are free to use without adding additional licensing. When you click the Add Brand link, it will provide you with a list of all brands that are available. Selecting one will take you to the Create Template page. Once you have created a template, the brand will be listed every time you open EndPoint Manager. So after you enable a brand, the next step is to create a template that will be the basis for building your phone configuration files. In my example, I'm going to quickly review a bunch of the options you can define when building out your configurations file. I'll be using a Sangoma template in this webinar. If you're using a different brand of phone, you may not have as many options exposed. Since we develop both the PBX software and phone firmware, we typically can do things with Sangoma phones that may not be available or easily done with other third-party devices. On the General Settings tab, as shown here, you define where you want the phone to connect, its SIP registration, as well as where it should look for its configuration file. You can also tell the phone to download a newer or specific firmware version. If you don't define this, the phone will use its currently loaded device firmware. The next tab when building your template allows you to define regional settings for your phone. Things like time zones or daylight savings time, phone display languages or phone web GUI languages, and so on. So if you have, for example, Spanish users, you can set the phone's GUI to display Spanish prompts. The third tab is the Expansive Option tab. This allows you to really get under the hood and define things like your LCD font size, backlight timeouts, brightness, screensavers, ringtones, enable contact photos, define how three-way calling works. For example, the three-way calling, you can set it so it might hang up on the other callers if you hang up, or you can set it to where it connects them into a conference when you hang up, so they can continue talking after you hang up. As well as many settings, other settings in this tab to customize the way your users interact with the phone. You can define how button presses work. Lots of different options in this tab, fully explained in our wiki. On the fourth tab, you can configure redundancy options, things like connecting to a warm spare FreePBX system or routing your calls proxied through a Sangoma Vega gateway. So in the event your PBX goes down, your extensions can still call each other and route phone calls out by the PSTN connections of the gateway. The fifth tab allows you to configure your phones to connect to your PBX by a VLAN. So you can go in and put your specific VLAN settings directly within the configuration file. And the sixth tab enables your phone to be configured to interact with an LDAP directory. So once you go through all those tabs and have your base template settings configured, you can then define which phone models you want to enable for your system. Note the Sangoma template allows you to create base templates for our entire line of phones and our Vega gateways. Once you select a model, you can then define the buttons on the phone by entering BLFs, speed dials, and phone application buttons if enabled by your device. In this example, I've enabled a visual voicemail button, so when the user clicks on it, it will open up their voicemail application. Many of our phones in EndPoint Manager also support the ability to define background images. Some resellers will put their company logos here or their clients' company logos. We even have some customers that will change this image on a weekly basis, showing their top salesperson of the week and so on. EndPoint Manager will automatically resize any image you add to this template to fit the screen of your phone. When building templates, you saw a few tabs ago that we allowed you to define which firmware you were loading onto your devices. For certified manufacturers, our engineering department will test and make available within the FreePBX EndPoint Manager the latest tested versions of certified partners' specific firmware. If you're working with a phone vendor that's not certified, we've got the default versions of firmware that we loaded and tested at the time we configured EndPoint to work with those phones. We also allow you the option to upload your own custom firmware, be it bleeding edge, untested firmware directly from the manufacturer to use on your devices. In the base template configuration I just showed you, we only expose a small portion of the most common settings you may want to modify in your phones. So the settings we expose in the user interface of the EndPoint Manager are very defined things. If you really want to get under the hood and make custom settings, or you're using a manufacturer's phone that doesn't have a setting exposed in the EndPoint Manager interface, we give you the ability to get into and edit the base configuration file for the template. This allows you to modify the phone's config file and save those modifications so you can easily deploy that same template to all of your devices. Once you have templates created, the next step is to assign those templates to an extension so that PBX will write out the configuration files needed to provision your phones. There are a couple of ways you can map extensions. You can do a local network scan to find new devices or manually assign templates to users. You can also enable your PBX with default Sangoma phone templates that any phone can log into with credentials that you provide them. This allows you to provision handsets without first mapping them inside of EndPoint Manager. So we have several ways to map your extensions, manually or by HotDesking. We have a couple of different manual options using the local network. I'll go over those in a second. These will require that you know the MAC address of each phone you're configuring or have access to the local network. And then the second option for mapping your phone is to utilize HotDesking, which can be utilized in a more flexible manner and doesn't require a pre-setup. So after you've created templates in EndPoint Manager and you're ready to map your PBX extensions to an EndPoint template, To build the config file for your phone to use, you'll need to know what the MAC address is of your endpoint and what extensions you want to assign that endpoint to. So you want to have your extensions created on your PBX prior to getting to this step. If you need to create a lot of extensions at once, you can do that using our separate bulk handler module. So that allows you to go in and create a ton of extensions for larger systems, or you can go in and create them real quickly using the standard tools within FreePBX. Once you go back and have your extensions created and you go into extension mapping, the tab in EndPoint Manager module, you'll see there is one line for each extension as highlighted on this slide. You can click on the Add Extension button to manually add your endpoints. When you add an endpoint, you'll select which extension it should be mapped to and the type, and then type in the extension's MAC address, or the phone device's MAC address, and then define which template the system should use when writing out the config file. Once you enter those credentials, you hit Save it, and the system will then write out the config file for you. You can also export your endpoint list, edit it in your favorite spreadsheet program, and then re-import it back into the system. This allows you to quickly build out really large systems. Kind of the downfall of this is you do have to manually type in your MAC addresses, and there is also obviously a potential for error if you're typing in the wrong MAC address. So outside of individually entering the MAC addresses or bulk uploading them using the input tools I showed you on the last slide, EndPoint Manager can also do a network scan to look for unprovisioned endpoints. So a network scan uses Nmap to detect known devices on your local network. Based on the MAC address, we'll then tell you what manufacturer that MAC address is from, and you can define what template and what extension you want those MAC addresses mapped to. Once you click on Save and Submit, the system EndPoint Manager will then write out the configuration files for those endpoints. Sangoma phones can be configured to connect to your PBX by HotDesking. In this scenario, you create a default template for your Sangoma phone and point your phone to your PBX for provisioning. The phone will load a default screen allowing your end users to automatically register to the PBX using predefined credentials. So to enable HotDesking, you want to make sure that your Sangoma phone template has a default, the keyword there is default, internal or external destination configured, and that template is enabled for HotDesking. So once your templates are created and your phones are mapped to devices and extensions and you've generated your configuration files, nothing will happen at this point until you tell the phone where to go download that configuration file. There are a few ways to do this. Manually configure the phone, use PnP or plug and play functionality of Sangoma phones, set up DHCP Option 66 on your local network to tell the phones where to get their configurations, or use Sangoma Zero Touch Configuration Cloud platform to auto-provision your device. So manually configuring a phone means that you'll either have to physically touch each phone and go through the phone's touchpad and screen or web interface to manually enter and point the phone where to download its configuration. If you're only configuring a handful of phones, then this is a pretty easy method. Anytime you do a factory reset on that phone or you have to change out hardware, this step is going to have to be repeated. Another option is if you control the local network and it supports it, you can enable DHCP Option 66 to point your phone to automatically look to the PBX's IP address for its configurations. In this scenario, when you plug in your phone into the local network tells it to go to the PBX to download its configuration files. This keeps you from having to manually touch each phone, but doesn't work on remote phones outside the local network and does require an understanding of the existing local network and DHCP servers to configure. A relatively new option for the FreePBX EndPoint Manager is our PnP or Plug and Play phone configuration tool. With this tool, your PBX, when you plug it in, will broadcast itself on the local network, and Sangoma phones will see that broadcast, and you can quickly select the FreePBX server that you wish to pair with to download your configuration files. This is great for local phones on simple networks, but most likely will not work on remote networks unless you have some expansive networking skills. The final and easiest option is the Sangoma Zero Touch Cloud Service. This platform allows you to point your phones to their PBX and configuration files, whether they're local or remote. Each phone is configured in the Sangoma portal to automatically connect to the proper PBX for its configuration files. This means system administrators can drop ship a phone to a remote end user. That end user can then plug in the phone and enter their username and password to have the phone be auto-configured with their extension and their specific speed dials and button maps. So the Zero Touch Provision tool consists of EndPoint Manager and our Cloud Redirection service. From within the Sangoma portal, you can assign Sangoma phones associated with your account their destination for downloading their configuration file. Each Sangoma phone is actually configured with its own credentials certificate. So when it connects back to our configuration server, we verify that it is we verify the MAC that it is a Sangoma phone, and we verify that it has the proper certificate. If those two do not match, we do not send credentials. If they do match, we drop into a secured connection and send your phone its provisioning IP or fully qualified domain name address. Once you've submitted that information in the portal, you can then go reboot your phone, submit and save your data, and your phone will now securely reach out to our redirection server and hit the configuration server of the phone system that you've specified. Your user is then presented with a login option. They can then log in to their extension with the credentials that you provided them. They log in by entering their extension number and their voicemail password. The phone will apply the default template, including the button maps, and then register the extension without a reboot. And no reboot in the zero configuration model means that your end users are not freaking out wondering what's going on. You don't have to tell them to reboot or unplug or how to reboot a phone. It just magically happens for them. Administrators can also log in with the global admin password they set up when configuring the default Sangoma template. When using EndPoint Manager with Sangoma phones, you can also expand on the functionality by configuring your users' phones with access to over a dozen Sangoma phone applications. Phone applications allow you and your end users to easily control complicated features directly from phone soft keys. Phone apps allows a close integration of PBX and calling features directly with your users' phones. These are supported on Sangoma and Digium phones for free. There is a paid add-on for some limited support on some Yealink, OBI, Mitel, and Astra handsets. Phone apps make training users to utilize calling features a breeze as they're built right into your phone. Things like conference room monitoring, visual voicemail, call forwarding, and so on. Things like visual voicemail make the phone system easier to deploy and train for end users. No longer do you have to teach them feature codes or how to navigate their voicemail, listen to the voicemail. They can do it all right on the screen of their phone. Or an app like the conference room application where users can see and manage people when they're assigned conference bridges directly from their phone screen. And that brings me to our last feature of EndPoint Manager I'm going to talk about today. It's the ability to allow your users to modify their own phone button maps, meaning they can change their speed dials and BLFs without a system administrator's involvement. It means you don't have to roll a truck to go change somebody's speed dial on their phone, or you don't have to figure out how to remote back into your customer's network to remote in and change phones. This, of course, is permission-based and can easily be reverted back to the default assigned template button map by a system administrator. So if I had to summarize some of the benefits as to why you might want to add EndPoint Manager to your FreePBX deployment, first and foremost, it allows you to put manual provision behind you. Next, it's easy. Provisioning phones is one of the more tedious and complicated tasks you'll encounter when configuring a PBX. We make that process simple and intuitive. We have a lot of end user customers that actually use EndPoint Manager to manage their own phones, so you don't have to be a sysadmin or a telephony guru to make it work. It's fast, it's a great time saver. You don't have to reach out to every handset to configure phones, and if you support systems remotely, you can manage devices directly from the PBX GUI without having to remote in or tunnel to the actual endpoint to make modifications. And EndPoint provides a standardized environment, one setup across multiple devices. And that functionality is greatly enhanced when you support the FreePBX projects financially by deploying Sangoma S-Series and Digium D-Series endpoints. We give you a lot of additional features at no additional cost when you use our phones. So that's it for the EndPoint Manager. For obvious reasons, we don't offer trials of EndPoint Manager because we would have people provisioning their phones and then never paying. But we make the licensing cost extremely affordable for everything that it provides, and for the amount of ongoing development work we do to enhance the software on a regular basis. So if you create a portal account and log into the store, or you can purchase directly from the FreePBX admin interface, EndPoint Manager for a 25-year license is $149. And if you want to get the latest and greatest updates every year, there's a yearly upgrade fee of $26.82. Or you can purchase the annual license for $75. Phone applications for supported non-Sangoma or Digium phones are $499 or $89.82 per year for updates, or an annual license fee of $165 if you prefer to just pay annually. Basically, with 25-year licenses, we provide software upgrades for the first year, and if you wish to upgrade the software after that, you can pay for that nominal renewal license to continue getting updates past that included first year. And as I stated, both EndPoint Manager and phone apps are free for Sangoma and Digium phones. If you really want to learn how to use EndPoint and the best practices for configuring your phones with FreePBX, please sign up for either our free online training or our classroom training at the Sangoma University site, which is training.sangoma.com. We also have extensive user guides at wiki.freepbx.org, or you can, of course, contact the sales department or hit up our online forums for additional information. Okay, that's it for the slideshow. Let me go through a couple of questions real quick. Gentleman asked, with UCP, is the user setup backed up in the event that a reset requires reloading? The user setup is backed up to their user control panel account. So if they do log into a different phone, then that will follow them to different phones. In the event that an administrator needs to go back in and restore it to a template, or a user's really mucked things up, or they really, or maybe you've got a new user starting and you just want to go reset that template, you can do that directly from the administrative interface as well. Well, that's it for the questions. We'll be doing another webinar next week, so please feel free to visit sangoma.com/events, and next week we'll be talking about Zulu, so make sure to go sign up for that. Again, this is Preston McNair with Sangoma, and thank you for spending time with me today.